I'm going to talk about the GVP model on the risk management systems. This model will replace what is currently in volume 9.8 regarding the risk management systems. So as we all know, the EU legal basis for the risk management system were introduced in 2004 with the revised legislation that came into force in November 2005. And in the regulation and in directive, it was stated that there are some documents that need to be included in the application for a marketing authorization. And it says that the detailed description of the pharmacovigilance system and, where appropriate, of the risk management system that the applicant will introduce. So this legal basis that we had in the past was not very clear what specific situations will require a risk management system. So then in 2010, we have the revised legislation related to the pharmacovigilance, and the aim was to strengthen and improve the activities in pharmacovigilance in Europe. Okay. Sorry. So the major impact of this new legislation is basically to reinforce the legal basis for the risk management system. So in the future, we will have to submit, companies will have to submit a risk management plan for all new marketing authorization applications, and also a risk management system can be requested in the post-authorization phase if there are concerns. The risk management plan, as Hoover already mentioned, is focused on the planning. This planning should be prospective and dynamic according to the information that is becoming available, and the activities should be proportional to the risks known. There will be a key role of the new Pharmacovigilance Committee in relation to the assessment of the risk management and also into these updates. The post-authorization safety and efficacy studies are integrated elements and may also be a condition of the marketing authorization. The summary of the risk management plan will be made publicly available, because now we only have the summary table that is included in the EPAR, but this summary will be completely different and is directed to the general public. And there is also an innate requirement to monitor the effectiveness of the risk minimization. And this is a responsibility not only for the marketing authorization holders, but also for the agency and for the member states to monitor how effective these risk minimization activities are being. So the principles, what we try to put in this GVP model, so we have the implementing measure that is very high level. We only have the format and the content defined, so the details will be in the GVP model. And these details are aligned more or less what we had in the ICH, and we try to merge what we had in the volume 9A and in the template of the risk management system. And we also, of course, according to the experience that we gained during these 6 years and the feedback that we had from the stakeholders, we try to keep what was worked and then change what was less good and improve. So as we all know, the purpose of the risk management plans is to describe what is known and unknown about the safety profile of the medicine. And according to this knowledge, what do we plan to do to further characterize or identify the risks? We also need to know according to what is known, and we need to put measures in place to minimize or to prevent the risks, and also very important to assess the effectiveness of those interventions. We also need, and this is new, to document the need for efficacy studies in order to maximize the benefit risk of the product. I think this template is very well known for all of us. This is what we have currently. So the template is divided in 2 parts, safety specification and pharmacovigilance plan, and the second part on the evaluation of the need of risk minimization. And if there is a need for additional risk minimizations, we will have the risk minimization plan. So in the future, this is the proposed structure of the EU RMP. We structure in 7 parts. So in the first part, we have the product overview, where we have the administrative information. The second part is the safety specifications that we had previously. And here we organize this safety specification in models to be more flexible. And so we can use some of these models in, for example, in the PSURs. And some models, for example, the epidemiology of the disease, will be all the information will be done in the marketing authorization application, but this will not change in the future. So any future update, some of the models don't need to be updated, so they can be locked, and you only submit what is new. So this is very important to, at least to simplify the work of industry and also for us to assess what is really new. And then we have the pharmacovigilance plan and the plans for studies on effectiveness and long-term efficacy. And we have now the risk minimization measure or risk minimization plan that is mandatory for all products, even if there is no additional risk minimization activities. And we have the summary of the URMP. There are some situations, and this is described very well in the GVP model, that normally, for example, all parts of the RMP should be submitted. However, there are some exceptional circumstances, for example, in generics where some parts can be omitted. For example, we don't expect a generic to submit information on non-clinical and clinical studies because they don't have that data, so these parts should not be presented, are not expected to be presented. Also, for example, if the reference product don't have any additional pharmacovigilance activity, for example, there is no study ongoing, of course, the generic is not expected also to conduct studies, so the routine pharmacovigilance is enough, so they don't need to present the pharmacovigilance plan in detail. And also for the generics, it's very important because they will need to submit in the future for every new application the risk management plan. So this risk management plan should be based on the safety concerns of the reference product. And this will be a question, I know, how the generics will have access to the risk management plan of the reference products. And you can search, for example, for the centralized products, we have in the EPAR the summary table of the RMP for the reference product. If you don't have, in the future, we will have these summary tables publicly available. If not, you can always request information on this. But basically, if you see the SPC of the reference product, you will find what are the major concerns, what are the risks of that product. So the safety specifications part, it seems that is very new, but more or less is the same what was previously in the safety specifications. We just rearrange and reorganize the sections. So we have the epidemiology of the disease and indication, the non-clinical part, the clinical trial exposures, populations not study, post-authorization experience. We have these additional EU requirements that are the same. And then we have the identify and potential risk where we merge three different sections from the previous safety specification that are the adverse reactions, the interactions, and the pharmacological class effects. And then we have the summary of the safety concerns that will be the basis of the pharmacovigilance and the risk minimization plan. So here in the model 7 of the safety specification, we have the identify and potential risks. And as you can see in the GVP model, now the risk management plans can be submitted. They are not product specific, but they can be submitted. For example, if a company owns different marketing authorizations for the same active substance, they can submit only one RMP covering multiple products with the same active substance. However, when we are doing this identifying potential risks, we may need to structure the risks according, for example, if the risks are relative to the active substance, for example, if the risks are related to the specific formulation or the route of administration, if they are specific for a target population, because sometimes indications are different, or, for example, if we have one active substance with the prescription and non-prescription status, we can submit one RMP, but we need to split and identify very well what are the risks of the prescription and non-prescription. And then we have the pharmacovigilance plan. Here we put some clarification what is the aim of the pharmacovigilance plan. So it's to identify new safety concerns, to further characterize, to investigate potential risks, or to know more about the missing information. There is also clarification because sometimes there was confused between with the assessors and also with the companies about these specific these questionnaires to follow up specific adverse drug reactions. So this is clear in the GVP that this is considered routine pharmacovigilance activity. Also, for example, in the previous guidance, it was not clear, for example, the action plan for each safety concern. Sometimes the company presents the rationale and the objectives of the routine pharmacovigilance activity. So this is clear that we don't need the companies to provide the rationale for the routine pharmacovigilance. We only need to focus on the additional pharmacovigilance activities because the routine is mandatory and is referred in the pharmacovigilance system master file that no need to be repeated here in the risk management plan. It's very important to put a summary table of the additional pharmacovigilance activities and including also the expected dates of milestones, because we need to track if the company is complying with these milestones, and if not, they need to provide a reason for the delay, and we need to update also the RMP, of course. There is also this new thing that we can ask the companies. For example, when we have a class effect, we can ask different companies to join or to conduct joint studies together. And this will be, I think Xavier will reflect this in the next topic. And there is also guidance, for example, in this pharmacovigilance plan to include additional pharmacovigilance activities that sometimes are requested by individual member states after the RMP is approved at EU level. When you go to your member states, sometimes they ask additional studies, sometimes to support the reimbursement. And these studies, if they are important to collect safety information, they should be included in the RMP. And then we have this new part. There is the plan for long-term efficacy and effectiveness follow-up. This will require for pediatric medicines and advanced therapy medicinal products. And now the legislation gives us the opportunity also to request these post-authorization efficacy studies when needed. And this is, for example, when we have concerns about efficacy in everyday medicinal practice, because clinical trials does not reflect the reality. And for example, when the knowledge about the disease or the clinical methodology has changed, so we need to revise what we have approved in the past. So in this part, the companies should summarize the efficacy and the basis of this efficacy. For example, to provide, I don't know if it's possible in one page to summarize all the studies and the endpoints, but we would like to have a short summary. And also the following areas need to be discussed. For example, the applicability of the efficacy data to all patients in the target population, the factors that may affect the effectiveness of the product in the real life, and the variability in benefits of treatment for subpopulations. There is a guidance that is being drafted on these post-authorization efficacy studies. I don't know, we are still drafting and discussing with the Commission about this. And then we have the part 5 about the risk minimization plan. So as I said, this will be needed for all products independently if it's routine or additional. If the RMP covers different products, we may need more than one risk minimization plan. For example, if we have multiple legal status or cross-therapeutic areas or different risks for different target populations. There is a clarification in the GVP what is routine risk minimization activity. And there is a separate model that is being drafted about the effectiveness of risk minimization activities, where we are going to explain more in detail what is additional risk minimization activity. So on the contrary, now we ask a justification to the companies when they propose additional risk minimization activities. And of course, the focus on the effectiveness of the risk minimization activity is very important. And there is also some guidance about educational materials that they should not be promotional. There is advice, for example, to consult communication experts, patient and healthcare professions that will be involved, and they are the target of these materials. We may request a similar layout and content, for example, for different products with the same active substance, like the generics. And the final version needs to be approved always by the national competent authority. And this, as I said, we will have a summary of the RMP that will be publicly available. in the European web portal. This will be written for lay reader, and the information will include the disease disease epidemiology, summary of the risk, but this risk need to put in context of the benefits. There will be a summary of the safety concerns, a summary of the risk minimization activities, and the plans for post-authorization safety and efficacy studies. And this summary of the RMP will be linked to the list of medicinal products subject to additional monitoring that will be published in the agency website and the national competent authorities. We don't have yet any idea, we don't have decided the final format of the summary of the RMP. We are working on it. We have planned a consultation in May with stakeholders, including patients and healthcare professionals. Of course, one size will not fit all. We still have the summary table in the EPARs, but the objective of this summary is not the same of the summary that we have in the EPAR. So basically, this summary of the RMP will be based on the epidemiology of the disease, on the safety concerns, and the pharmacovigilance plan and risk minimization plan. So we'll try to provide and put the risks in context of the benefits. We'll summarize the safety concerns in lay language, and we will provide all the details about the plans of the studies and the risk minimization activities. So in conclusion, what I can say is that RMPs are now substance specific. The safety specifications are organized in models to increase flexibility. The activities should be proportional to risks. Plans for studies on effectiveness and long-term follow-up may be requested and may be part of the condition of the marketing authorization. There is a need to justify additional risk minimization activities. Risk minimization plan will be needed for all products, and there will be a summary of the URMP publicly available.
Good afternoon. The posterization safety studies is a concept that has been introduced in the new legislation and has been expanded in the good vigilance practice. And this is something that is important, I think, because up to now there were a low level of enforcement from regulatory authorities to marketing authorization orders. So I would like first to give a legal background on these requirements. In the Directive 2010/84 EU, one article has been added saying that a marketing authorization for medicinal product may be granted subject to one or more of the following conditions, and this includes to conduct post-authorization safety studies. And further on, it is said that the marketing authorization shall lay down deadlines for the fulfillment of this condition as necessary. Now, perhaps more importantly, that in the directive and the regulation, two articles have been added saying that after the granting of a marketing authorization, the national competent authority may impose an obligation on the marketing authorization holder to conduct a post-authorization safety study if there are concerns about the risks of an authorized medicinal product. And the imposition of such an obligation shall be duly justified, notified in writing, and shall include the objectives and time frame for submission and conduct of the study. So this is a rather strict level of enforcement to marketing authorization order, as this imposition of post-authorization safety study becomes an obligation, as becomes a condition to the marketing authorization. Now, what is interesting is that in the directive there is also an article 107M, which says that this chapter, and this is a chapter on the supervision of the post-authorization safety study, applies to non-interventional post-authorization safety studies, which are conducted voluntarily or pursuant to obligations. So now the directive includes a dichotomy between the studies that are imposed as an obligation and studies that are voluntarily conducted by marketing authorization holders. And there are some obligations to studies that are conducted voluntarily, and a lot of obligations to do that are conducted as an imposition imposed by regulatory authorities. However, there is also an article saying that this supervision of post-authorization safety studies is without prejudice to the national and other union requirements for ensuring the well-being and rights of participants. So this is also an important aspect that we have to keep in mind. Now, the directive, there are a set of articles that apply only for studies that are conducted as an obligation, and these articles impose and provide provide a procedure for the submission, supervision, and assessment of study protocols and final reports. Now, there is also an implementing measure that has been drafted by the European Commission, and this implementing measures, the chapter on post-authorization safety studies applies only to the studies that are imposed as an obligation, and this legal text then provide the format for the study protocols and for the abstract and final study reports of post-authorization safety studies. So now there will be a standard mandatory format for the study protocols and study reports. I would like to stress the definition of the post-authorization safety study, and to mention that now this definition is made legal, so it is in the legal text. Formerly, there was a definition in the volume 9A, but now there is a definition in the legislation. And this definition, as you can see, is rather large. It says that it is a study relating to an authorized medicinal product conducted with the aim of identifying, characterizing, or quantifying a safety hazard, but also confirming the safety profile of the medicine product, or measuring the effectiveness of risk management measures. So this is a very large definition of a post-authorization safety study. And we have reflected that as possible objectives of the path in the good vigilance practice. So possible objective that now we are considered as covered by the legislation are to characterize the safety profile of a medicine, to provide reassurance about the absence of a safety concern, to investigate potential or identified risks, to evaluate risk of a medicine product used in authorized indication by patient groups not studied in the pre-authorization phase, to assess patterns of drug utilization, and to evaluate the effectiveness of a risk minimization activity. So in the following slide, I would like to explain, perhaps not the detail, the structure of the GVP chapter, but more to explain the rationale of a number of options that have been presented in the chapter, and explain why also it is our understanding of the different characteristics of this post-authorization safety study. First of all, as I told you, the directive now makes a distinction between studies that are voluntarily conducted and studies that are conducted as an imposition, as an obligation. So these studies that are voluntarily initiated by MAH may cover a very large range of studies, because these are all the studies that are not imposed. So these studies will probably cover also the studies that are agreed between regulators and companies. When we discuss a safety issue, we agree that there is a need for doing a study, and this study will be included in the risk management plan. So probably that these studies that are voluntarily conducted will be the majority of the studies that marketing authorization holders will perform. So there are the studies also that will be conducted pursuant to an obligation, and as I already presented, as a condition to the granting of the marketing authorization holder, the marketing authorization, or after the granting of a marketing authorization. These studies imposed as an obligation are a condition to the marketing authorization. These studies should be justified based on benefit-risk consideration, and they will be very closely supervised by the Pharmacovigilance Risk Assessment Committee, by the PRAC. Now, based on this slide, I would like to make a comment and a reflection that we had when we developed the good vigilance practice, that the legal requirements for these two types of studies, voluntarily performed and performed pursuant to an obligations, are very different. So there are a lot of obligations, legal obligations for the second type of studies, those that are obliged. However, from a scientific point of view, we do not consider that such differences are some of the differences, and for example, for the format of the protocol or for other specification, are justified based on science. In particular, many of these studies voluntarily conducted by companies will be mentioned and will enter the risk management plan, and then therefore we can have also an impact on regulatory decision. That's why in the good vigilance practice we have taken the option that although legal obligations apply only to the second type of study, many of these obligations are recommended to marketing authorization holders for the studies that are voluntarily conducted by them. So what are the characteristics of these post-authorization safety studies? First of all, they can be clinical trials or non-interventional studies. And the MAH has the responsibility to ensure that the PAS is not a clinical trial. If it is a clinical trial, then all the legislations related to clinical trials will prevail, and that legislation will apply. So the Module 8 of the GVP on PAS mainly applies to the studies that are non-interventional. In the good vigilance practice, we have provided general guidance and requirements, and the guiding principle for these guidance and requirements are that we have to apply and try to harmonize or have consistent scientific standards to increase transparency, to increase harmonization between the different types of studies, and to ensure a minimum level of quality control. So this part B of Module 8 applies to all PAS. However, as I told you, the level of enforcement that we can apply to these guidance depends on the type of studies, but also on different topics. And that's why this Module 8B is a bit complicated, because we have to accommodate different bits of legislation that apply to different types of studies, although we think that most of these recommendations should apply to all studies. There are, first of all, general principles that when you developed protocols, relevant scientific guidance should be considered. Investigators that will be involved in the conduct of the study have to be qualified by education, training, and experience. And if a research contract is needed to be made with external investigator, this research contract should ensure that there is continued compliance to regulatory requirements. However, we would like that the scientific expertise of the external investigators could be exercised throughout the conduct of the study in order to ensure high methodological standards. That's why we recommend the use of the NCEP Code of Conduct as a basis for the research contract. Study protocols, so no PAS can be conducted without a study protocol, and the study protocols have to be transmitted to the relevant competent authorities, and again, there are differences between the types of study. The QPPV should be involved in order to ensure that at the national level, the study will comply with the regulatory requirements. We also recommend, and I will go back to this, on the registration of the protocol into a public registry of post-authorization safety study, and the substantial amendments to the study protocol should also be notified and recorded. An important aspect of the PAS is the accurate and adequate reporting of pharmacovigilance data, and this includes the data relevant to the risk-benefit balance, and also there is a section on the expedited reporting of serious ADRs, and I think that for this part, this is I would say a relief for many marketing authorization holders and investigators, that for studies with secondary use of data, it is now clearly stated that there is no requirement for expedited reporting. And the events and reactions should be summarized in the final study report. For studies with primary use of data, primary collection of data, then there should be an expedited reporting where possible, where a possible relationship between an event and a suspected medicinal product is considered by the reporter or the marketing authorization holder. Study reports, progress reports may be requested before the start of the study or at any time during the study conduct, because if for that product there is a safety issue that arises, then regulators may need to know what is the progress status of studies that relate to this product, and the timing may be agreed before at the stage of the development of the study protocol and the agreement of study protocol. The final study report has to be submitted as soon as possible after the finalization the finalization of the study, and at least within 12 months. And now in the GVP and also in the implementing measure, there are definitions of the date of the start of the study and the date of the end of the study. And the final study report should be transmitted to competent authorities. We also advise that investigators, external investigators, should be able to publish results of a study when they lead the conduct of the study. And something which is a recommendation, we have no legal obligation for it, but we would like really to have to receive the manuscripts that have been accepted before the publication. It happens too frequently now that we receive publications of a safety concerns the week after it has been published. So and sometimes the journalists are aware before us that there is a study that has been published. So we would like to have these manuscripts that have been accepted for publications within a time limit. The format and the content of the study protocols and study reports is defined in the implementing measure for all studies that are imposed as an obligation, but they are recommended also for all other studies. We don't see why there should be differences between studies that are conducted voluntarily but are included in the risk management plan and the other studies. This format and content is a technical contribution from the EMEA to the European Commission with an expert committee, and this is based on international guidance, the ISPE, STROP Consort, and subjectives for study protocols, and yet sub-guide for standards in pharmacoepidemiology. So I don't think this format is something new. It is based on international agreed guidelines. What we recommend and we would like to achieve actually is the registration of studies in the EU registry of non-interventional post-authorization safety studies. So this is now, you may know that there is now an NCEP registry. This registry will be overhauled into EU registry of non-interventional post-authorization safety studies. So it is recommended for all PAS. The objective of this registration is first transparency, but it is also a tool for DMEA to fulfill its obligations to publish the study protocols and final results of PAS that have been imposed concerning centrally authorized products. It is also a very important tool for exchanging information, and it will also help minimize administrative procedures and duplication of work between different national competent authorities or who would like to study the same types of safety issues. There are obligations for study that are imposed as obligations for traceability and documentation of change to the data. There is a possibility to inspect and audit analytical data set and statistical programs used to generate the results. And also MAH should ensure that the external investigators are qualified by education, training, or experience to perform their task, and there should be documentation of these qualifications. And my final slide, I think, it's that there are also specifications and regarding data protection the MAH should ensure that all study information is handled and stored in such a way that it can be accurately reported, interpreted, and verified while the confidentiality of study subjects remains protected. This is something that we consider very important to emphasize. And I think this is my last slide. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.